Welcome, Gunrunner.
I bet a lot of you have been wondering when I was going to cover the Commodore Amiga in my Amazing Exclusives series, or why I hadn't covered it already. Well, I was always conscious that I didn't want to cover all the popular and well-known systems in one go, and I've always tried to mix them up a bit with more obscure consoles and computers, which many of you actually prefer me covering. But yeah, we've got there in the end, as here we are. I should make it clear that this video only covers games that are designed for the original 16-bit Amiga computers, or OCS machines as they became known, once the 32-bit AGA Amigas arrived, which I'm sure I'll also investigate in due course. One thing that became abundantly clear when I started researching this video was that the vast majority of the Amiga's exclusives were shoot 'em ups, and indeed the best exclusives seem to mostly fit into this genre too. In fact, this could have easily just been a list of shooters with nothing else, but that wouldn't have been very interesting for you guys, so I've made a conscious effort to try and mix things up a bit and include some games covering other genres, so I hope that I've succeeded in adding some interesting variation. But I won't go on much more in this intro, because these videos really are all about the games, and I have some truly incredible ones to show you, so let's get on with the show as I present 10 amazing Commodore Amiga exclusives.
Look out for the amazing Commodore Amiga packs. And remember, you can win one by calling Commodore right now on 0891 1010 98 with the answers to our questions. And don't forget, all calls cost under £1, so don't miss out. Get on the phone right now for your chance to win.
This graphical tour de force by Psygnosis is extremely interesting in the fact that the main character in the game is actually the company's very own mascot. This was the first and only time that the now famous Psygnosis Owl would take on this role, but in this horizontally scrolling shoot 'em up he definitely found his perfect role. Not only is Agony beautiful looking, but it's beautifully designed too, and doesn't just take advantage of the hardware on offer, but also the various real life abilities of the game's character. I say this because the owl possesses echolocation, just as a real night prowler would, and this acts as your weapon throughout, through all 6 of the stunning fantasy themed worlds, defeating the enemies, collecting the power-ups, and ultimately gaining back your true human form. Lots of hardware tricks have been used here to get this game looking as good as it does, but as impressive as the visuals are in Agony, I must also give a special mention to the wonderful soundtrack too, which is provided by 2 bona fide Amiga music legends in both Tim Cold Storage Wright and Jerome Tell. Another really interesting thing I found out about this game is that the box art was actually reused from an early ZX Spectrum game by Arctic Computing called Planet of Death. How strange. Agony is not just a great game, it's a title to make rival 16-bitters swoon in envy. Dungeon crawlers have always been a hugely popular genre, right from the very day that Atari first unleashed the amazing gauntlet on arcade audiences. Team 17 certainly can't be credited for any kind of originality with the first Alien breed that most certainly took its cues from Gauntlet and even more so perhaps Sega's Alien Syndrome, but what it did do was take those games, add in the atmosphere from the Aliens film franchise and then take it to a whole new level. Not content with just serving up an almost endless supply of xenomorphs to kill, Alien Breed also stacked the odds against you even more by sending in some huge bosses too. After the success of that first game, Team 17 couldn't resist making a sequel, and it remains exclusive to the Amiga too. Subtitled "The Horror Continues", that statement is about right really, as it's pretty much more of the same, but with lots of small improvements to up the ante. We have much bigger levels with more aliens and thusly a much greater challenge. We also have a choice of different characters that offer more firepower of their own and individual stats too. They've also upgraded the visuals with better scrolling and more detail. I also could have included Alien Breed 3D in this list too, but I always preferred these original top-down games a lot more, and they play much better to the technical strengths of the Amiga II. Unusually and also rather surprisingly for a Thalion game, Lionhart was released exclusively for the Commodore Amiga. I say surprisingly because the company were well known for their impressive work on the rival Atari ST, where they constantly pushed the machine to its very limits. This decision was taken because the game was designed to specifically take advantage of the Amiga's advanced graphical capabilities and custom chips. It's a stunning looking platform game with a fantasy theme where you're on a mission to save the cat people from an evil warlord trying to take over their land. When Lionhart was released, it was described as setting new standards for Amiga platformers, and it's easy to see why, as the visuals here are truly stunning. The main character from the game also went on to make an appearance in another Thalion title, the impressive RPG Amber Moon. Unusually for an Amiga game, Lionhart also features 3 difficulty levels, something that was more common in console games of the era. The best part of this is that the hardest difficulty not only features stronger opponents, but also differently designed environments that offer an additional gameplay experience. There are few Amiga games that impress more than Lionhart, not just in graphics but in all areas. I still find it quite bizarre that this game isn't talked about more by Amiga owners, as it's truly stunning. There was a point in the Amiga's history when it became clear that the many rival home computers could no longer compete with it, and Walker is a great example of that. In fact, the Atari ST version of this game was cancelled when it became clear that the computer wouldn't be able to handle it in the way it was intended. Programmed by the legendary DMA Design, would eventually morph into the company we now know as Rockstar North, Walker is perhaps most notable for its stunning visuals, which include some huge sprites, but there is actually so much more to it than that. In the game, you take the controls of a bipedal mech that is fighting the Great War of 2019. Yeah, that was a few years ago now, wasn't it? You must fight your way through all 4 levels of this then, well, kind of futuristic future in order to end this battle once and for all. Probably the most unique feature of Walker is the way you have to monitor the temperature of your guns. Heavy firing causes them to overheat and then you must wait for them to cool down before you can resume artillery. So you can't just constantly spam the fire button and hope for the best. Walker was ranked 58th in Amiga Power's top 100 games of all time, and it's easy to see why. Aside from the stunning visuals, there's also some great sound and solid gameplay too. My only minor complaint is the game's perhaps a little bit too short, but you'll have plenty of fun finding out. I really wanted to put a cutesy mascot platformer on this list, and I was actually surprised by just how few exclusive games there were for the Amiga in this category, given how common the genre is on the computer. But in the end I went for this game, which does have cutesy platformer-like elements, but could better be described as a run and gun. The game is all about an 8-year-old boy called Ruff Rogers, who loses one of his marbles whilst playing in the park and decides to follow it down a rabbit hole. Of course, this isn't just any rabbit hole, it's actually a portal to an alien planet, one ruled by a madman known as Dr. Destiny and his army of brutal robots called the Tin Heads. Ruff soon discovers that his marble collection has been scattered across the planet, and yes, you've guessed it, you must set out on a quest to help him reclaim his collection whilst freeing the planet from Dr. Destiny and his minions. So you simply run and jump around each level collecting all the marbles so the exit will open, and destroy the Tin Head army as you go. You start off with a pretty basic weapon, but will soon come across various power-ups that make your mission a lot easier, such as a flamethrower, laser gun and missile launcher. Magazines of the era widely praise Ruff Tumble for its very attractive console-like qualities, and I have to say I agree, although I will say that soundtrack is very Amiga indeed. When the original Iridium was released for the Commodore 64 back in 1986, it was met with widespread acclaim by the press and players alike. Although it was later converted to other formats too, none of them were ever as successful or well remembered as the C64 original, which very much deserved all the accolades that it won. For those who are somehow unaware, Iridium is somewhat of a mix of the two most popular types of shoot 'em up, horizontal and vertical. This is because although the screen does scroll horizontally, the action is actually viewed from above, like a vertical shooter. In the game you're flying over a giant spacecraft trying to take out the gun placements and the scout ships that are being sent out to stop you. Once you destroy the ship you simply move on to another one, only much harder. This game seems to have been inspired by both the Death Star from Star Wars as well as the classic Williams arcade game Defender, with you being able to switch the direction of the scrolling at will. This sequel improves the audio and visuals a huge amount, as you'd no doubt expect, but also adds in a number of new features such as a scanner, a superb 2-player mode, and perhaps most importantly of all, power-ups for your ship. This makes Iridium II a pretty much perfect sequel to an already amazing game, and one of the best shoot 'em ups available for the Amiga.
Land now.
now. Player 1 destroyed. Player 1 ready. Land now. Land now. Land now. Land now. Land now.
Striving to make this list as balanced as possible, I really wanted to include a fighting game. But the pickings were pretty slim, and let's face it, the Amiga wasn't well suited to the genre, due in part to the standard single button controller, but also because of the restrictions of RAM and loading from disk, which meant that things like animation were often lacking. However, with Renegade's Elf Mania, we probably have the best of the lot, and indeed the game was very well received upon release back in 1994. I think the main reason for this is the way the game is designed, playing to the Amiga's strengths. So rather than having loads of complicated specials that are almost impossible to pull off on that one button joystick, each character has just one special move as well as a range of standard attacks. Beating enemies in the game earns you coins, and then that money can be used to purchase more characters, making the single player mode a lot more interesting. And speaking of interesting, they did something novel with the multiplayer mode too, which employs a variation of noughts and crosses. The game has an overhead map consisting of squares that represent fighting locations. Beat your opponent and the square is marked with the winner's symbol. Getting a line of 6 squares wins the game. Elfmania looks fantastic, sounds pretty good and plays better than you'd probably expect.
Winner! Pinko. Pinko. Round 2. I'll get you. I'll get you. Game time. I'll get you.
When it comes to 3D shoot-em-ups on the Amiga, there are few, if any, games that are as impressive as Binary Asylum's Z-Wolf. The game is often compared to Zark, aka Virus, as you fly over an open-world 3D landscape from a third-person perspective, destroying targets. However, the actual gameplay is much closer to another helicopter-themed game in Desert Strike. There are an incredible 32 levels of action here, with plenty of variation in the missions, including your standard locate and destroy, hostage rescue, protection, and those dreaded escort missions. Your chopper is equipped with a cannon, rockets, and guided air-to-air missiles, but these are all limited and will need to be topped up, likewise with your fuel. There are various landing points in which to do this, and also various friendlies around the map that will help you in some situations. The controls are pretty interesting here, as you can play with either the mouse or the joystick, with each feeling very different. I personally prefer the latter. A small on-screen map helps you get to the right locations, and you also have a little scanner that highlights nearby enemies. In the centre of the status panel you can see your lives and money, and also each weapon as you switch between them. Z-Wolf looks absolutely stunning and plays just as good as it looks. It was also followed by an equally accomplished sequel too. I first discovered this game on a forum when I was talking about one of my all-time favourite racing games, Super Burnout for the Atari Jaguar, and an Amiga fan offered up this game as an equally accomplished motorbike-based racer, and I was very intrigued by what I saw, especially as the game was published by the usually excellent Psygnosis. Although it was offered as an alternative to Super Burnout, the game is actually quite different in style, as that game is 2D and this one uses 3D polygons. It actually reminded me a lot of the excellent No Second Prize by Thalion, which I was very familiar with from the rival Atari ST. One of the first things that really impressed me about this game was the amount of options. As well as usual features such as the ability to practice or go for the championship in a full season, there were also loads of customisable features too, such as increasing control realism, adding road hazards and turning roadside objects on and off. The latter of which improves both the speed and frame rate, as the more things you turn off the better it runs. You can also customise the controls too, being able to use the joystick or mouse, increase or decrease sensitivity and select transmission type. You can also adjust the skill level too. Overall, Red Zone is a really accomplished bike racer that deserves a lot more attention from Amiga owners. I had to save this one until last because it's by far my favourite, even if it is far from being the most original and unique. You see, Data Storm is a pretty blatant clone of the classic Williams arcade game Defender, but one that ups the ante in almost every single area. We still have the same horizontally scrolling gameplay, where you can fly in either direction shooting down the enemies, and the same radar to see where all of these foes are positioned. We also have a very similar save and protect mechanic too, but rather than saving humans and returning them to the surface, you now have to pick up pods and take them to a portal while stopping the enemies from stealing them. But now I've covered the many similarities, it's time to talk about the many enhancements on offer here too. Firstly, there are power-ups which greatly improve the firepower of your ship and also add things like shields and extra lives too. Perhaps more importantly, however, we now have bosses that have to be defeated, which is what gives the game a big point of difference from other more modern Defender clones like Star Ray and Cybernetics. I should also mention that your ship can now retain damage, although this drains your shield rather than the one-hit kills of Williams' game. Data Storm certainly looks and sounds pretty good, but this one is all about the classic old-school shoot-'em-up gameplay.
Right now, you can instantly win one of 200 Commodore Amigas with scrummy curly quavers. Or pushover, a new computer game starring me and my pal, G.I. Ant. There are 10,000 to be won. Details on every packing. Watch out, computers have got curly!
And that rounds up my look at 10 amazing Commodore Amiga exclusives. Can you think of any other one-off titles that only ever came out for this ever popular 16-bit computer, or do you think some of the games I did include are unworthy of inclusion? I also love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons who continue to support my channel and make videos like this possible. Therefore I must give special thanks to the following patrons and YouTube backers in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Paul Daniel, Mins, Dos Gamerman, Luke MC, Carl Olsen, Seth Robinson, Grady Haynes, Mark Strickland, Kalimatorn, Trogdor the Burninator, Daniel Skoronsky, Ben P. Stein, Tabby Kitsune, Alan J. Dodds, and Electrum Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now, where you can get access to host extra content including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights, and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.